So thanks for joining. My name's Richard and this is Kate, both of us from Blue Yonder, obviously. You've joined us for the latest in a series of talks around our campaign for real innovation. So the campaign for real innovation got going last year because we noticed that innovation is a really big word with a lot of definitions and a lot of different aspects to it. So we thought we'd spend a lot of our time thinking about the specifics behind it, trying to bring it to life in terms of exactly how do you make it happen and how do you get great innovation to market. So the internal perspective to that, and then also once it's heading towards market, the external part of that as well. So we started by demystifying it, and there was a load of sessions that some of you might have been part of last year where we had client-side industry experts talking about the really practical challenges that they face as the innovation moves through the pipeline. And we're going to continue that this year. And there's another session coming up in a few months, which is going to be really deep diving the practical barriers that people face as they're moving innovations through the client-side organization. So things like stakeholder management, storytelling, and getting the buy-in. So that's on the way. But what we're going to focus on today is more, we've got the products ready. We're moving quite rapidly towards the phase where we're about to hit market, and we need to give them the support to make sure they actually fly, because a great innovation that doesn't fly in market is basically a waste. So that's about claims, and that's what we want to talk about today. So the way the session is going to work, we've got a video prepared, which Kate is going to introduce. She's the real expert on claims. And then that lasts for about 20, 25 minutes. And then we've got plenty of time for a Q&A afterwards. So have a watch and let us know what your questions are. And I'm watching them here on the screen and we'll be able to talk through them. Over to you, Kate.
Thanks, Richard. Hi, everybody. Lovely to see you all this afternoon. As Richard said, my name's Kate. I head up the Sense Lab team here at Blue Yonder, which is the team that predominantly do all of our big claims testing. We do a lot of claims testing across the world for big global brands as well as smaller brands as well. We have had claims validated on PAC, on TVC, and more recently, which we've been very excited about, on billboards in Times Square. So yeah, lots of exciting times. So I'm going to play the video. Throughout the video, we're going to touch on why do claims, finding the right methodology for your claims project, working to global best practice and working with your legal team, and also at the end bringing those claims to life for your stakeholders. So I'll play the video. As Richard said, that'll play for about 20 minutes, and then we'll come back with the questions and answers session. Why do we make claims? We make claims to win in the real world. We want your product to have the edge over your competitors. We want the consumer to walk down the aisle and your product to jump out on shelf. That's what your claims are going to do for you. It may be on PAC, it may be on TVC, it may be on a billboard, but ultimately those claims are going to help you win in the real world. So the challenges that teams have when making claims is that they might not get the claim. That's always a risk. We never know. We're going to come on to that a little bit later on as to how we can try and help you get those claims and win in the real world. But yeah, you might not get the claims. It's also very expensive. It's a huge cost to do claims research. We're trying to help you do things to mitigate maybe having to spend so much money or spend so much money and find out that you've not got the claim. What we want you to do is, if you're going into a big claims test, go into that claims test knowing that you're going to win and get those claims. Also, in some countries, if you don't get the claim legally, you can't try and get the claim again. So there's lots of things to think about. So when we're doing these claims tests, it's not like a normal product test where we can just go out and do the product test. We have to do a lot of comms and a lot of communication with the client's internal legal team. Yeah, this is a really interesting side of things and what we're doing a lot more of. Previously we always did a lot of, just thinking about the functional side of claims, but it's about the social, emotional and functional side of claims. It's experiential claims. It's not always thinking about just the efficacy of the product. And we have to do this now because we have to win. There's so much competition out there that we have to make sure that your product has the edge on the competitors. So let's take a painkiller, for example. It's got to get rid of your headache. So whatever the claim may be, we need to make sure that your headache's going away with that claim.
Also, is it fitting in with your lifestyle? Can you use it on the go? Can you fit it into your handbag? Can you easily get it out of your handbag? Can you easily fish for it during the night on your bedside table? Can you easily get into that pack in the dark or on the go? Can you then get the tablet out of the sachet, out of the blister pack? All these things are actually really, really important because it's part of people's lives. They're not just getting out of the cupboard in broad daylight now, they're using it on the go. You have to think about those things. We've also got the social claims side of things. Can you get on with your day? Can you still take the kids to school? You've taken this product, can you now take the kids to school? Can you get in your car and drive to work? Can you function properly and do what you need to do for the rest of the day? That is all really worth thinking about with your products. So it's functional, it's social, and then we've got the emotional side of things. So what else can we bring out of that product that's going to really resonate with consumers? So if we think about ingredients, there's so much talk about ingredients now and what ingredients can do for you. For example, turmeric. If there's a turmeric ingredient within there, can we pull that out as well? Can we talk about that in TVC and what that ingredient is going to do for you, as well as getting rid of your headache? Superiority claims versus as good as. It depends what you're looking for internally and what your objectives are with your claims. You could be looking for superiority claims, so to make sure that you are superior to your competitors. You can say that you're better than a certain product, or it might be that we're looking for as good as, we are as good as our competitor. So that's something that we need to know at the offset, and that's something where your claims need to be geared towards. So, for example, Aldi are great at this. If you think about the Aldi ads that you watch, they always tend to put on their ads that this product is as good as, so their cat litter is as good as the major competitor out there. So we want to make sure that the claims get the best absolute chance of winning in the real world. That's ultimately what we want to do for our clients. There's lots of ways of doing that. I think beforehand, what we tended to do is just go into big claims testing, hope, fingers crossed, that the claims are going to win. Whereas now we're taking a little bit of a step back and we're trying to help our clients make sure that they go into those claims tests and win. Fairly, of course, always thinking about the fair. It's a fair test. So I think to start off with, have you tested the products yourselves? Have we all got in a room and tested those fragrances, tested those products, tasted those products? That's an absolute must, because that helps us decide what methodology we're going to do. Actually, is it too much for the consumer to taste? Are we putting too many products into the test? Are we putting too many similar products into the test, and therefore there's going to be no difference between them? So I think ultimately that's our first step. We have to do that first. We can then test the methodologies to make sure that we are using the best methodology to help us win in the real world, and we're going to get those claims. So for example, we can look at, do we want to do a straightforward monadic test? We might have 4 different prototypes, 4 different products, for example, testing against one competitor. So do we want to test those sequentially, and a questionnaire after each one, and then we can compare them all at the end and we can have a really clear ranking right at the end? Or do we want to test each one against the competitor each time, so we've got a paired comparison every step of the way we go? Or do we want to test all of our products first, identify the preferred product, and then test that against the competitor? So we've got our preferred product compared against the competitor. Lots and lots of different ways. It all depends on the products that you're testing, the claims that you're testing, what your objectives are internally. We then help develop those methodologies. What we will do then is we will test those methodologies with a lot lower base size. So we might have 10 consumers. If, for example, we've got 3 methodologies, we might have 10 consumers per methodology. And then we can see which methodology is actually going to win us that claim. And it's all fair. It's all done as a fair test. Everyone's doing exactly the same thing. The competitors getting tested the same way that our products are getting tested, your products are getting tested. And what we can also do is we can watch that data live. So we can sit in a room, we can look at the data as consumers are completing the test, and at the end of the day we can make a really quick decision. Right, that's the methodology. And you know what, it's also about the consumer experience as well. So recently we did this and we asked the consumers after each methodology, how did you find that? How was it? And we can think about fatigue, and we can think about how long they were in the facility, and all things like that help us decide on which is the best methodology to go with to help win those claims. So the type of methodology that we do, we tend to do in the facility, which is a controlled methodology. So we can control the amount of spray that's sprayed onto the blotter, how far away from that blotter is the product sprayed, how many pumps of that spray. We can control that, and that means that everybody's testing everything exactly the same, and it's a fair test, and it's in the facility, and we can watch that as well. The clients can come along and watch that. If the clients can't get here, we can stream that. So it's all very, very, very controlled and makes it very fair. And it also means that we can stand up to legal challenge as well, because we know exactly how everything was tested. It might be that our claims need to be a little bit more in context, a little bit more in the real world. So we might test in the home, for example, and let people do freely what they would do with the product, maybe with a little bit of a protocol. But if we do that, we still need to make sure that things can stand up in court. We still need to make sure that what we're asking those consumers to do, we can prove that they've done that. So that's really, really important. And we help and guide clients through that. How we interview is important. It's really important to take that into consideration of your methodology. If we are doing, so here we're talking about interviewer administered versus self-completion. If you're going home, obviously it's self-completion because we're leaving the consumers to it. If we're doing in a facility, it can be self-completion or it can be interviewer administered. We would always recommend interviewer administered because that way we're more likely to get the claim. Because naturally having an interviewer sat there asking you questions naturally makes you a little bit more positive. If you're just sat there on your own testing something and answering questions, you have a tendency to be a little bit more negative. And we're not forcing that positivity. It's just naturally that you are likely to be more positive with someone sat there. And actually, if it's a comparative claim, if we have got competitors in there, the competitive product is getting exactly the same test. So it's, again, making sure it's fair all the way through. So we have to take global best practice into consideration when doing a claims test, and we have to make sure that we are following and compliant with the MRS Code of Conduct. So I'll go through these things one by one, but these are all things that we need to consider. So first of all is the questionnaire. We tend to always ask the claims up front. Let's get those done first of all. When we do a claims test, we always ask other questions, and there's reasons for that, but we always want to ask overall opinion, purchase intent, lots of other questions. If we ask those first, that's going to bias our answers to the claims. So we do the claims first, and then we concentrate on any other questions that we want to ask. We have to think about those types of questions as well. So we typically always have purchase intent, overall opinion. There's lots of other sort of attribute questions that we ask in those questions, and these questions help us understand what's coming out of the claims. If we're not getting the claims, if we are getting the claims, these questions help us answer the why. We do have to be careful on the types of questions. So for example, we wouldn't just have a yes/no question, or if we have got a yes/no question, in order to be compliant with the MRS, we have to make sure there's a don't know or a no preference. We have to make sure we're giving all opportunities of answers within those questions. But our Likert scale questions, etc., are the ones that we tend to go for, one of the preferred ones. Thinking about base sizes, that's definitely a consideration. In the UK, we would always go with 100, no less than 100. Great, let's see if we can go with more, and the budget lets us go with more. We would always go with more as well because it gives us a little bit more robustness. In the US, 300 would be what we would go with. We need to go with 300 to be legally compliant. So it'll be different for every single country. So I think the advice here is when we're doing claims, no matter what country we're doing claims is, there's different rules for each country. So we have to think about what's the base size that's going to stand up in court, and also the recruitment criteria. Who do we need to be recruiting? Because again, that might differ by country as well. I mean, we always look at our top two box. So we've got the top two box. We've not just got yes, and we've not just got no. We've got more chance of being able to get the nuances in the data. We also need to think about whether we're going to brand or debrand the products. typically we tend to have the products debranded. Then that way we haven't got any bias from the brand. If you are testing if you're doing a comparative claim and you're testing your product against a competitor product, and you've got someone who's extremely loyal to your product and not to the competitor product, that's going to bring bias into it, or vice versa. So if we want to do a true read, a true test, let's unbrand the products and just get them just testing the products based on the product itself. So we need to think about mitigating risk. Obviously, we might get asked this question in if it was ever get challenged, or if we ever had to go to court. And we also want to make sure these are all part of our claims portfolio. So when individuals come into the facility, or even if they're taking part in a home usage test, they all sign a consent form. That happens in every single project, no matter whether it's claims or not. But very important, they sign a consent form. We then take pictures of them. And have, as part of that picture, we'll have like the ID on there as well. So that ID matches them to their data, etc. And that means that we can prove that, for example, in the UK, if we're doing 100 people, we can prove definitely 100 people have come through that door, and we can identify those 100 people via their ID number. If we're asking them to do anything else, we get extra consent. For example, if we're asking them to do some testimonials, which we can talk about a little bit later on, there would be an extra consent form done there as well. But that's really important because this has to form part of our claims portfolio. So the claims portfolio is really, really important. If we ever get challenged in court, we need to make sure we've got this claims portfolio. So for every single claims test we do, we have every single bit of documentation in that portfolio. And that's from the start of the test right to the end of the test. So we've got the proposal, often signed by us and by the client. We've got the screener, we've got the actual central location test questionnaire, we've got the instructions that we asked consumers to do, we've got the protocol that we asked consumers to follow. We've even got the briefing notes in there that when we brief the consumers when they come in. We've got the consent forms, we've got the photos of people, so absolutely everything is in that portfolio. That means that if anything was ever challenged or we ever had to go to court, hopefully not, we've got all the evidence there in the portfolio. We also have raw data in there, of course, as well. So anything that we produce as part of the project and that goes to the client is in that portfolio. We might pass every claim in the test. We might get 70% or above for all of our claims, but we can't put all of those claims on the test. On the pack. But we might have lots and lots of claims as part of this test, 20, 25. But which go on pack, which go on the TV advert, which go on the billboard. There's lots of different analysis we can do for that. And I think max diff is a really important analysis, because if we do get all the claims and we want to make sure which are the most compelling, if we run some max diff, we can see which are the top 3 or what the top 5 claims that are an absolute must. We also get a lot of clients having claims in there that actually, when you read the claims, you have to read them a few times because they're very, very similar. There's just a slight different take on wording. So doing a max diff helps us understand which wording actually consumers are resonating with. It's really interesting because actually consumers pick up on very slightest detail. So the max diff will tell us. We can also do key drivers analysis. So if we're asking overall opinion or purchase intent as part of the questionnaire, that means we can do key drivers analysis. And if we ask what's important as well as part of the screener, what's important in this category or for this product, it means that we can then we can look at those claims and actually say, well, you've got that claim, but that's not actually important to the consumer. We know that from the questions that we've asked, so let's not use that claim. So the data is obviously the really important part of the claims project, but when we do great research, when we do great claims projects, we want to bring it to life, and we want to get the key stakeholder buy-in. But sometimes we can't do that with data, and sometimes people don't even have the time to read however long the report might be. So let's bring it to life. There's lots we can do here. So we tend to, at the end of the test, we pick certain consumers to take part in a testimonial or a quick IDI. These are consumers that we've recognised as being quite articulate, able to express themselves. We've looked at some of their responses in the data. We know that they'll be great people to have as part of the IDI or the testimonial. We'll sit them down and we ask them some questions. And what this means is that they can bring to life what they've just experienced. And we ask them to do really great stuff. We don't just ask them loads of questions. We might ask them to do a brand reveal. So we might show them, because everything's been debranded, we might then show them the brand that they've just used and see the passion that they have as the, oh my God, was that really that product that we just used? And it just really brings the data to life. We can also ask them to do silly things like, I don't know, if it's a deodorant, we can ask them to put the t-shirt on inside out that they've just used the deodorant for, and they can see that they haven't got any marks under their arms. And it just means that we can get that buy-in from the stakeholders a lot quicker, and it just brings it to life, it brings the data to life. Top tips for claims research. Probably lots. The things to think about. You're going to have lots of conversations with your legal team, back and forth. So don't go into claims research thinking it's probably going to be a really quick thing, because we have to get it right. We have to have legal on board and we have to make sure it's right. And I think just really look at your claims. Sometimes people can do a claims research and have like 20 to 25 claims. Is there something we can do before that to whittle those claims down? Are we confident that we really want to put all those claims in? Sometimes you can do a max diff quite quickly and cheaply to whittle those claims down actually, and know which claims are resonating before we then put it into the actual product test. And then when we get the data from the product test, we kind of know that those claims are resonating. So the ones that perform the best, we know we can go with. Other top tips, just making sure that we can, if we get challenged on anything, make sure we can answer those questions. So when we're talking about methodology, visualise ourselves being challenged on it. Let's walk through being challenged by our competitor. So our competitor comes up to us and goes, can you prove that? Can you prove how you did that? Let's really talk through that. Don't underestimate being able to prove it in case you get challenged or brought up in court.
All right. Hope you found that interesting. We've got a bit of time for Q&A now. So obviously, if we're all gathered around the table, it'd be really nice and we could have a bit of a chat. There's too many people on the call to open up microphones and things, so we'll have to do it over the chat. So if you look for the Q&A function rather than the chat function, then we can see your questions in there. So just give it a second for a couple of those to come through. Any questions at all, anything that you'd like to pick up on from what Kate's been talking about? In case you're wondering, while we wait for that, that was footage from Blue Yonder's own top-class research facility here in Leeds. So that looks like something you might find useful. Let us know. Away from that, I've got a couple of questions here already, actually. So first one is really basic one. Someone obviously interested in the basics of the research part of it, Kate. So when would you use monadic versus sequential monadic when you're doing a claims test?
Okay. Yeah, good question. But I think there's no one size fits all here. I think we really have to look at what our internal objectives are and what product it is that we're doing our claims testing for. If it's one product and we just want to literally get the claims to the efficacy, then it's a monadic, and we just test that one product with so many consumers and test that those claims get passed. If we're looking for superiority, however, we would definitely then need to do a sequential monadic. We need to do our product, depending on how many, it might just be one, it might be a few different formulations versus the competitor, and we need to prove then that we get superiority over that competitor. Same as if we want just as good as, we still need to do that sequential monadic because we need to get that comparative data.
Yeah, so it's a matter of understanding specific objectives for each test, like a lot of research. So there's one other one here. So this one's about the legal team. So that's a particularly interesting, thorny area with claims. So when you talk about spending time communicating with legal teams, what sort of communications do you have? What questions do you need to ask them? What sort of conversations do you need to have? Just, legal.
Yeah, so I think I referred to this in the video a little bit, but you are going to have a lot of conversations with legal. Sometimes it's actually really straightforward. And I'm not saying that every test there is going to be all these conversations with legal, but quite often they are, especially if you've got key competitors out there in the market that are going to challenge you. So do be prepared for that. But I think ultimately it's making sure that those claims that we put into the test, those claims will stand the test of time if they are getting challenged, and that you've made sure they've been approved internally. So for example, if we take 100% natural ingredients, are the ingredients actually 100% natural? Have you, of all your departments internally, talked to each other, R&D, with the formulation team, with the scientist team? Have we proved internally that all those ingredients are natural? We are confident with that before we make that claim. And if we do get challenged on it, we're happy we've got the evidence.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, a lot of I dotting and T crossing internally. Yeah. Close relationships important. Okay.
It's great because it brings the teams together as well. It gets everyone talking, which is all really good.
Yeah, it's a good way to join everyone up. So we've got a question, nice and simple one. Thanks, Caroline from SC Johnson. So why are you requiring extra consent for testimonials? Why not just wrap it up in the original consent?
Well, we can do, but we don't ask everybody to do the testimonials. We only ask sometimes a proportion of the sample to do the testimonials. So quite often we'll have like a straightforward consent for the test and then a separate one just to pull out those people that they are actually consenting to be on video. Those testimonials tend to stay internally with the client, like they don't go out to market unless we want them to. And then of course we'd be asking for even more consent. But yeah, it's typically because not the whole sample tend to be doing it. We can ask the whole sample and then just pick and choose who we want to interview.
Just trying to keep it as light as possible for the respondent, I guess.
It is. The consent forms can often be quite lengthy. We try and make them as consumer friendly and really clear as much as we can. But you're right. I mean, we can include it. There's no hard, fast rule that we can't include it.
Yeah. Okay, so one more here then. So how do you achieve a fair test when you're looking at claiming superiority versus competitors in products which are not absolutes? So products where you need to cook it or portion it out manually, like poultry or burgers or cake mix.
Another good question, but we just need to make sure everything's controlled. So if we're testing, if we're doing taste testing, we obviously need to think about our prepping as well as our tasting. So we would obviously straight away off the bat, we need to make sure we've got health and hygiene in place, because again, that's really, really important. Maybe we have one chef throughout the whole project to make sure everything's cooked and prepped exactly the same. Again, if you're testing your product against a competitor, we need to make sure that's really fair and everything's been tested exactly the same and consistent. So always having the same chef to do that. Making sure people are tasting the exact same every time. So again, that might involve weighing out ingredients or weighing anything really, weighing out exactly how much product they actually get given. This could be apparent on normal product tests, but sometimes on a normal product test, we just want to have the in-context testing, and therefore we don't need this control with claims quite often, especially if we're doing comparative. We need to make sure we've got that control.
Because it's got to stand up. All right, so we've got a couple more coming in. So excuse me for reading off the screen. So if the debranded claims test is the fair way to test in the real world, the claims are associated to the brands and consumer perceptions, how to tackle that. So yeah, contrasting what's done in a test.
Yeah, we have done branded claims before. We tend to do debranded. I think especially if you're testing against doing comparative, but if you're just doing a monadic, just testing your product, we could test branded. And there's no reason that we can't. And we have to make sure that we are actually interviewing people who are buying into the category anyway, who are probably already aware of the brand. Again, there's no real hard and fast rule to say it has to be debranded. We would work with you just to make sure that we are eliminating any kind of bias as much as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Hope that helps. So then there's another one here. So how can we stay up to date with the regional regulations about claims so that we can make, how do we stay up to date with the regional regulations about the claims we can make based on consumer products, e.g. number of consumers to recruit for in-home tests, types of attributes we could use these for? So basically, how do you stay across the legal part of the claims test and the regulations?
Yeah, it's a hard question because, like you say, regionally, everyone's very different. So sometimes we might get asked to do claims testing in countries we've not done it before. So it's just basically doing our desk research and making sure that we get it right. You also, if you've got a legal team or have that as part of you need to speak to them as well, because sometimes it depends on what your legal team are happy with. For example, we in the UK, for example, we would always say no less than 100, but actually some clients ask us to do a less than 100. So we have to make sure that as long as your legal team are happy with that and that you're happy that that would stand up, then we will go ahead and do that. So yes, it's about regional differences, but also about internally as well, your legal teams. But you're right, you do have to do your research, and we're here as well to help you do that.
Yeah. So that was for Sophie. Hi, Sophie. And then Keelan. Hello, Keelan. So there's a question here about the issue of global brands. So I'll read it all out. So what's your advice for claims testing when working with global brands? Does testing in one market allow claims to be made across various markets, or do you need to make sure that each specific market, the population tested is represented each time? Can you even do that?
I think that depends on how different your markets are. You tend to have lead markets for your products. So we have, so for example, we'll have a client that might only ever do the claims for that product in the US. But personally, I think all people are different. So you're best off, if you've got a lead market and that's your lead market, then just do it in that market and go for it. If you've got two markets and they're very, very different, then I would suggest doing it in both.
Yeah, combining priorities for budgets and where you really need the claim, etc.
Yeah, and it might be that you go with a higher base size in your lead market, and maybe just go with a lower base size in the other market, and just test it, just test the water in the other market, and maybe it's not as high a priority. But again, you could, as long as you're putting a budget into your lead market, that's the main thing.
Yeah, brilliant. Hope that helps, Keelan. The questions are getting longer, so you're testing my ability to read out live on air. So I'll keep going. So do you need to run a comparative study if you're not specifically mentioning any competitors, but you've successfully passed the question in your consumer research questionnaire? I prefer this product to my usual moisturizer, and you want the claim, whatever percent of people said they prefer our moisturizer to the current one. So do you have to do that if you've already done it in a consumer study?
No, I think, if you're naming the brand, obviously you have to do it. But I think if you've got the question in there, it's better than my normal moisturizer, you can make that claim. It's better than people's normal moisturizers. We would gather that data on what their normal product is, but that's probably not a high enough base size. So obviously everyone's products are probably completely different. But I think if you've got that claim, it's better than my usual product, we can make that claim.
Yeah. Again, just sort of joining on everything you've been saying, it's all about understanding the specific objectives of the test you're doing, right?
Yeah.
If you need to make that claim and you can tick all of the boxes that would make sure that stand up and that it would work for you, then you can use it. But you've got to do that diligence first, right? Yes. So yeah.
I think as well, I think a base size is really important. Just to touch on that, like we all see things out there in the market where, I don't know, particularly on face creams and things, where it's like 30 people out of whatever, and it doesn't really give much confidence. So I think always think about your base size, like what is going to give people the confidence to believe that claim, especially if you're going to make it transparent on pack. I recently saw something which was a really high base size, tested over quite a long period of time, and it was a great start. And it was like, yes, I really believe that. So I think that's something to take into consideration as well.
Yeah. So a little bit more time. If there are any more questions, we've got one more here, which I'll just read out. So this is about cannibalization. So how do you make sure that a claim you make for a new SKU into a market doesn't damage the reputation of a similar SKU you might have already in the category? How do you handle that?
Yes, I think if you've got a few SKUs, I think if you're adding to your repertoire or you're having a line extension of something, I think it's just important to make sure your claims are different. I mean, there must be a reason why you're doing that line extension or bringing that other SKU out. So let's make it really clear what those claims are and how they differentiate. Could be something really simple, like it could be that your new product or your line extension is just a different usage occasion. Could be something quite emotional. It might just have an extra ingredient in it, which is going to bring out a different occasion or a different usage reason for your product. Or it could be something maybe where the ingredients are a little bit more premium, therefore you can get a higher price point on it. But yeah, just differentiation, I think, between those SKUs and making sure the claims are different.
All right, thank you, Kate. I think, looking at it, that's all the questions that we've been asked. So going once, going twice. If anyone's got any others, got a second to post them up. Oh, and then bang on the line, another one does come in. So it's anonymous, so I don't know who said it, but thank you for the question. So have you experienced testing investigational devices and products before they have passed clinical safety and efficacy, as typically we would need to see the clinical data first before evaluating any more emotive or softer claims. If so, what are the main considerations, and what are the differences that we're aware of between the US and the EU, etc.? So a pretty complicated question.
I mean, typically we tend to test things that have been through ethics and have got all their testing done. In fact, I think in answer to your question is most products that we do claims testing on have passed internal and external ethics. We do work with clients to get the ethics passed. So we're always open to have those conversations with you, but ultimately we can do tests with the product, not necessarily claims, but just not actually trying the product. It might be that we're testing, getting them to look at it, feel it, that kind of stuff, but not actually. It depends on what the product is. I don't know what the product is, but there might be a way around it without actually physically trying the product, and then you pass ethics. Hopefully that answers your question, but that's a little bit more complicated, I think.
It's again coming back to the objective, isn't it? So when we think about claims, it tends to be the closer to the market phase, but obviously there's a huge amount of testing and proving that goes on beyond that.
Yeah.
And the more medical it is, the more rigorous that becomes.
Exactly.
But that's kind of another specialism in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, we have actually tested devices and products before, but it's more about not actually physically testing them. It's more like touching them, feeling them. Does it feel right? Does it does it feel right in your hand? Can you pick it up? That kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. So hopefully that helps.
I think if anybody thinks of anything afterwards, feel free to continue to reach out to us.
Yeah. So well done. I feel like we've put you on the spot and fired 10 questions at you. I think you've given us a great answer. So thank you, Kate. As Kate says, really happy. We'll share the content after this session and send it around so that everybody's got it. And if you do have any other questions, more specific, maybe something you weren't comfortable sharing in front of the whole audience, just get in touch and we're happy to talk. Other than that, we hope you found it interesting. Nice short session. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Kate, for all of your knowledge and the video. And we'll see you on the next installment of the Campaign for Real Innovation from Blue Yonder. Thank you very much.